Hey guys, welcome to TS Tactical. Today we're going to be taking a look at tubular lockpicks. Now, this is kind of a aside from our main goal of providing lockpicking information to YouTube as well as to our website. We advocate the use of lockpicks and the general knowledge not only from the Locksport application, but also from just the general knowledge base to kind of learn the illusion of security. So if you know how a lock works, you can better protect against it in your house, for your family, and so on and so forth. So let's get into what a tubular lock is and how they work. Alright guys, today we're going to be taking a look at one of the tubular lock picks that Southward makes. They make both a 7-pin and an 8-pin, when technically what you've got is not the pins themselves within the lock pick, the pins are actually within the lock. What you have are independent needles that essentially map the lock and the pin depth, and you'll kind of understand what that means in a second when I explain kind of how the tubular lock works itself. But the main points to illustrate on the tubular lock pick itself are that there are multiple channels for those different needles to ride into. So for instance, on this I'm holding the 7-pin tubular lock, and that means that it has 7 independent needles around it that actually map those pin heights. So what you're doing when you're inserting this into the lock is that the needles need to have enough give to actually map those points. So when you insert this into the lock, what you've got are different heights that are set. So I'll try to illustrate that here with one of their lock pick trainers. This is the tubular lock pick trainer. This is the version without spool pins, and I'll be explaining the difference between spool pins and non-spool pins in a minute. But essentially what happens is that the tubular lock pick gets set into the lock, and each pin, just like a standard household lock has that we've explained before, so check out some of our other videos for kind of the general gist of how the lock works itself. But these, basically the actual pin heights that are allocated around the lock are set back into a secondary pin, and as well as contain a spring. So as you depress this tubular lock, it's engaging those pins, both sets, as well as the spring. So you have to provide tension onto the lock itself. At the same time, you're providing a twisting motion. Now, I haven't set this up properly, so it's not going to pick it right now while I'm sitting on here, but I'll demonstrate that on how you actually go about that. But again, kind of going back to the parts of this, you've got those needles as well as a locking ring. So that locking ring can be loosened just like this, and that's what provides the actual tension on the needles themselves. So what you want to do is you just want to rotate this down until it basically gets hand tight. And what I mean by hand tight is really just screwing it down till it stops turning. And that's all I do. I don't really, just make sure you're not gorilla gripping that or anything like that. What you want is just to tighten it up until it stops, and then just twist a little bit. So you're putting very little tension on that, because if you're familiar with regular lock picks, the tension wrench or torsion wrench, whatever you call it, is providing that tension. And with a tubular lock, the tension is being provided with this ring. So let's get into how this works. The first step in this is to take this washer and use that to help force this all the way down. So what you did by pressing that washer all the way down, as you can see, is that it adjusted each one of those needles all the way forward. So then what you're going to do is press this against a hard surface. So what you're doing is you're setting all the needles equal heights. So that's basically creating a base height of those needles all the way across the surface of that pick. Then you're going to take it into the actual lock, and this is an old gun safe that I had laying around the house that I had since lost the key to, which prompted me to get into tubular lock picking in the first place. So kind of a good segue there. So what you're going to do is you're going to line there's a small, essentially like a tube in the tube for the tubular lock. I guess that's why it is, I'm not sure, but you basically align that top center pin with the pin that's in the top of the tubular lock. Now all you're going to do is, as you press down on the lock itself, it's going to set those pin heights. So you don't want to over push and you really just want to go lightly on the actual tension you're providing. You want to just push enough to where it's depressing those springs within the lock, and then you're just going to wiggle back and forth. So you're basically going to turn clockwise and counterclockwise, and it's going to open. So let's try that out. So I'm just going to depress. I think I got my pin heights wrong. Let me make sure those are set. Okay, so now I'm going to depress here, and I'm just going to wiggle back and forth. And there we go. And it pops right open. It's kind of scary how easy it is to do this. It definitely takes, I think, less skill than a standard pin and tumbler lock does. Again, these are pin and tumblers in here, just like a standard lock. They're just set up in a tubular configuration. So as we kind of show the trainer, you'll kind of see how that's set up. Okay guys, so now what we're going to be working with is the lockpick trainer. So this is the tubular lockpick trainer. And again, what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of show you the gist of how the lockpick trainer works, as well as another example of the tubular lock picking this. So this is a 7-pin lock. And I think I neglected to mention this earlier. The tubular lock picks come in either a 7, 8, or 10, I want to say pin configuration, but I believe there's also an even higher configuration as well, more of a security lock. So what we have here are two different lockpick trainers, tubular lockpick trainers. One is standard pins designated by that little white dot, and a black dot for spool pins. And if you're kind of familiar with what spool pins are, is they're kind of, if you can think of an hourglass shape. That's what the bottom pins are set in, so they can produce a false set as you go to pick. And that's kind of a little aside from this lecture, and we can get into that in a further topic on lockpicking. But basically, locks are designed with spool pins for security, so they will produce a false set when picked. So get into that in a little bit, or perhaps a future video. So to set the tubular lockpick again, we're going to push that washer down again, depress it so it's even with the table there, and hopefully you can see this as I'm going to pick it. But again, remember, just like with pin and tumblers, you've got a spring down below, you've got the varying height pins, and then you've got standard pins on the top. So I'm just going to spin this till it properly aligns, just like that. And I'm going to press in and depress that and just start rotating. And then we go a little bit, that to jump. So I got it to jump, but not picked, so let's start over again. Don't be afraid to restart, and I'm actually going to let off a little bit on the tension there on that locking collar. I feel like there might have been a little too much tension on that. Rotate. All right, there we go. So now there's our trainer being picked. And I want to illustrate one of the coolest features of these tubular lockpicks is that once you actually map the pattern of these, you can lock down this collar and reset it and continue to pick over and over again with this same configuration. So what that enables you to do is to take this little tool that's included and actually map the heights of those pins. So you could take those heights, or basically that configuration, you can either take this or the actual pin height numbers to a locksmith, and they can rekey something for you. So that's a big benefit. So what I could do is basically reset this, adjust the collar, and come back up to our gun safe here. And again, we've reset this, push it down on the table there to make sure the surface is flat. And we're going to come back to this lock again, go ahead and press down, set it to where it opens. And now, as I was mentioning earlier, I'm just going to lock that collar down, slam that shut, and we should be able to just take this with this repeating pattern and open it over and over again. So you can see there's no actual setting of the pins each time. That's actually mapped to the key. So like I was saying, you can take the actual tubular lockpick itself into a locksmith to get it keyed for a lock, or you can actually use this decoder to find out the heights of the pins themselves. So another added benefit of tubular lockpicks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the presentation. Basically what we went through today are tubular lockpicks themselves, as well as these trainers that can be used. And again, don't think that tubular lockpicks have to be picked with a tubular lockpick. You can actually pick tubular lockpicks with the standard style of single pin picking, or you can't really rake these so much as you can with a standard pin and tumbler lock like you find on your house. But it's more kind of the single picking tension aspect of these. So hope you enjoyed the presentation. Let us know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.